She thought she was helping an old woman having a heart attack. She didn't know the woman was Madame Boksoon, matriarch of the Wajin Syndicate. And she definitely didn't know that saving her life would make her a daughter-in-law by sundown. Most people in the city knew 3 rules about the Wajin Syndicate. Don't speak the name Kang Dae-hyun in public. Don't ask questions if you see black cars with tinted windows. And never, ever disrespect Madame Boksoon. The matriarch wasn't just the mother of Korea's most ruthless crime boss. She was the conscience of an empire built on blood and loyalty. Elegant, sharp-eyed, traditional to her core. Cross her, and you didn't just upset one woman. You upset 3 generations of organized power. But on one humid Tuesday afternoon, Madame Boksoon crossed paths with someone she never expected. A waitress with natural curls pulled into a work bun, wearing a wrinkled blue uniform 2 sizes too big, balancing textbooks on top of a serving tray. The girl who would save her life and inherit a world she never asked for. The street outside Giovanni's diner was loud with midday traffic. Horns blaring, exhaust fumes thick in the summer heat, tourists clogging the crosswalk with their phones out. Madame Boksoon had just left her acupuncture appointment 3 blocks away. She walked alone, as she often did, preferring the anonymity of blending in. Her security trailed at a respectful distance. She was thinking about her son. 34 years old, brilliant, terrifying, and completely uninterested in marriage. The family elders were getting impatient. The whispers were getting louder. And that's when her heart betrayed her. It started as pressure. A tightness across her chest that made her breath catch. Then pain, sharp and spreading, radiating down her left arm like fire through her veins. Her vision blurred. The street tilted. She reached for the lamppost, but her legs gave out. Madame Boksoon collapsed onto the hot pavement, gasping, clutching her chest with trembling fingers. People walked past. Some glanced. Most kept moving. In a city this size, you learn not to get involved. But Zora King wasn't most people. She had just clocked out of her double shift, exhausted, her feet screaming in her worn sneakers. She was mentally calculating if she had enough for groceries and the electric bill when she saw the older woman crumple to the ground 20 feet away. Zora didn't think. She just moved. She dropped her tray. Her anatomy textbook hit the sidewalk. She sprinted to the woman's side and dropped to her knees, ignoring the burn of concrete through her uniform. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" Zora's voice was steady, even as her hands assessed quickly. Pulse weak. Skin clammy. Lips tinged blue. Cardiac event. Madame Boksoon's eyes fluttered, unfocused, terrified. "You're okay. I've got you. Stay with me." Zora elevated the woman's legs with her backpack, loosened the silk scarf around her neck, tilted her head back slightly to open her airway. She pulled out her phone with one hand, dialing 911 while keeping the other on the woman's wrist, monitoring her pulse. "Breathe slow. In through your nose. That's it. You're doing great." Madame Boksoon stared up at this young black woman with the kind eyes and the confident hands, and something ancient stirred in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. People finally stopped. A crowd formed. Someone shouted for a doctor. Zora ignored them all, focused entirely on keeping the stranger alive. Sirens wailed in the distance. And then the street went quiet. Not silent. But a different kind of quiet. The kind that happens when predators enter the space. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt, blocking traffic completely. Car doors flew open. Men in dark suits poured out, moving with military precision, phones pressed to ears, hands reaching inside jackets. And then he arrived. Kang Dae-hyun didn't drive up. He ran. He had been 6 blocks away in a meeting when the call came through. His mother. Collapsed. Unresponsive. He shoved through the crowd like a force of nature, his tailored black suit somehow still immaculate, his face carved from stone and panic. When people saw him, they moved. They knew that face. That walk. That deadly calm that meant someone was about to bleed. He dropped to his knees beside his mother, and for one unguarded second, the most feared man in the city looked terrified. Yama. His voice cracked on the word. Yama, can you hear me? Madame Bok-soon's eyes fluttered open. She smiled weakly, then lifted one trembling hand and pointed directly at Zora. She saved me. Dae-hyun's head snapped toward Zora. And the world stopped. Zora was still kneeling on the pavement, one hand on Madame Bok-soon's wrist, the other holding her phone to her ear, giving the 911 dispatcher their location. Her uniform was dusty. Her hair was escaping its bun in wild curls. There was a scrape on her knee from where she'd dropped down. She looked up at him, and her breath caught. He was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, intense dark eyes, a mouth set in a hard line. But it was the tattoo crawling up the side of his neck, disappearing under his collar, that made her stomach drop. She knew what men like him were. She'd grown up around enough of them. You, he said quietly, his voice low and controlled. Me what? Zora's tone was wary. You saved her. Anyone would've. No. His eyes held hers. They wouldn't have. The ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. Dae-hyun stood, barking orders in Korean, his entire demeanor shifting from son to general in an instant. He was directing traffic, coordinating security, ensuring his mother was stabilized. But his eyes kept finding Zora. She tried to slip away. She needed to get back to her apartment, grab a shower, make it to her night class by 7. This wasn't her world. She'd helped. That was enough. She made it 5 steps before a hand gently caught her wrist. Not rough. Not threatening. But absolutely unmovable. Dae-hyun stood there, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read. Where are you going? Home. Work. I have class later. You're injured. He nodded to the scrape on her knee, the red mark on her palm from where she'd caught herself. I'm fine. You're bleeding. It's nothing. One of his men approached, speaking rapidly in Korean. Dae-hyun responded without looking away from Zora, then turned back to her. The hospital. You'll come with us. It wasn't a question. I really can't. Miss, he paused, realizing he didn't know her name. Zora. Zora King. Miss King. His voice softened, just slightly. My mother will want to thank you properly. Please. There was something in his eyes. Not a threat. A request. From a man who probably didn't make many. Zora looked past him at the ambulance, where Madame Bok-soon was being loaded. The old woman was staring back at her with an intensity that made Zora's skin prickle. Fine, Zora said. But I have class at 7. I'm not missing it. The corner of Dae-hyun's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Of course. He guided her toward one of the SUVs, his hand barely touching the small of her back, and Zora felt the weight of every eye on the street watching her climb into a vehicle with the Wajin syndicate. She had no idea that in that moment, her entire life had just changed. Because inside the ambulance, Madame Boksoon was smiling through her oxygen mask, watching her son's face as he glanced back at the SUV carrying the brave Waitress. And in her heart, she had already made her choice. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. Zora King had been on her feet for 6 hours straight when she finally got her break. The lunch rush at Giovanni's diner had been brutal. Wall-to-wall businessmen from the financial district, tourists who didn't tip, and regulars who wanted to chat when she had 4 other tables screaming for refills. Her lower back ached. Her sneakers had given up any pretense of arch support 3 months ago. But her tips had been decent, and decent meant she could pay the electric bill and still have enough left over for groceries. She stepped outside into the thick summer air, letting the door swing shut behind her. The wealthy district always felt different from her neighborhood. Cleaner sidewalks. Fancier cars. People who didn't look tired. She pulled her anatomy textbook from her bag, planning to review the cardiovascular system before her evening class. Ironic, considering what was about to happen. That's when she saw the woman stumble. She was maybe 70, elegant in a way that suggested old money. Cream-colored cardigan, silk scarf, pearl earrings catching the afternoon sun. She had been walking steadily, purposefully, until suddenly she wasn't. Her hand shot out toward a lamppost, fingers grasping at air. Her knees buckled. Zora's textbook hit the pavement. She was already running before her brain caught up, dodging through pedestrians, her body moving on pure instinct. The woman collapsed onto the sidewalk, and Zora dropped beside her, knees scraping concrete. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes were wide, terrified, her hand clutching her chest. Her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Lips tinged blue. Skin clammy and pale. Zora's nursing training kicked in like muscle memory. "Someone call 911, she shouted over her shoulder, already checking the woman's pulse. Weak. Irregular. Cardiac event. She elevated the woman's legs with her backpack, loosened the scarf around her neck, kept one hand on her wrist monitoring the thread-like pulse. "Stay with me. Breathe slow. In through your nose." The woman's lips moved. Korean words Zora didn't understand. "It's okay. Help is coming. You're going to be okay." People gathered, forming a useless circle of concern. Someone offered water. Someone else suggested moving her. Zora ignored them all, her entire focus on keeping the stranger alive. Then she heard it. The screech of tires. Multiple vehicles stopping fast. 3 black SUVs blocked traffic, doors flying open. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with frightening coordination. And then a 4th vehicle, a sleek black sedan, skidded to a halt so close Zora felt the heat from its engine. A man exploded from the back seat. Zora looked up and her breath caught. He was tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her rent. But it was his eyes that made her stomach drop. Cold. Calculating. Absolutely lethal. A tattoo crawled up his neck, dark ink disappearing beneath his collar. He shoved through the crowd like they were smoke, dropped to his knees beside the woman, and for one unguarded moment, the cold mask shattered. Iama. His mother. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Zora sat in a plastic chair by the window, her uniform still dusty from the pavement, watching Madame Boksoon sleep. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Stable. The doctors had said she'd be fine. Acute angina, not a full cardiac arrest. Stress-induced. Manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. She'd gotten lucky. Zora should have left an hour ago. She'd given her statement to the paramedics. She'd confirmed Madame Baksoon was in good hands. Her night class started in 40 minutes, and she still needed to catch 2 buses to get there. But every time she stood to leave, Dae-hyun would appear in the doorway. Silent. Watchful. Not blocking her exit, exactly. Just present. And somehow that was more effective than any lock. He stood there now, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean in a voice so low it sounded like a threat. He'd shed his jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing more of that dark tattoo snaking down his forearm. Dragon scales, she thought. Or maybe waves. She couldn't tell and didn't want to stare long enough to figure it out. When he finally hung up, he looked at her. Really looked at her. Like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. You don't have to stay, he said. Then why do I feel like I can't leave? His mouth twitched. My men are protective. They see someone with my mother, they assume she's important. I'm not important. I'm a waitress who happened to be there. You saved her life. I did basic first aid. Anyone with a pulse and a conscience would have done the same. No. He moved closer, and Zora's back straightened instinctively. He noticed. Stopped a respectful distance away. They wouldn't have. Most people see an old Korean woman collapse, they keep walking. Maybe they call 911 if they're feeling generous. You dropped everything. You stayed. Zora didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The monitor beeped. Madame Baksoon's eyes fluttered open. Dae-hyun. Her voice was papery but strong. He was at her side instantly, taking her hand with a gentleness that surprised Zora. This man who looked like he could break bones without flinching held his mother like she was made of glass. I'm here, Iyama. Don't talk. Rest. I'm not dying, you foolish boy. Stop hovering. Her eyes found Zora. A smile bloomed across her face, warm and knowing. You. Come here. Zora approached slowly, unsure. How are you feeling, ma'am? Better. Because of you. Madame Baksoon patted the edge of the bed. Sit. Please. Zora sat. Dae-hyun frowned. Madame Baksoon looked between them, that smile deepening into something almost mischievous. Then she squeezed Zora's hand and turned to her son. She is your wife. I have chosen. The room went silent except for the heart monitor. Dae-hyun stared at his mother like she'd spoken in tongues. Iyama, what? I have chosen, she repeated, firmer now. She has the heart I've been praying for. Brave. Kind. Strong hands. This is the woman who will stand beside you. Zora stood up so fast the chair screeched. Ma'am, I think the medication. My mind is clear, child. I'm nobody's wife. I don't even know you people. Madame Baksoon just smiled. Not yet. Zora made it back to work the next morning, her body running on 4 hours of sleep and spite. She'd finally escaped the hospital at midnight after Madame Baksoon fell asleep and Dae-hyun got pulled into a phone call that sounded like it involved blood and consequences. She'd slipped out while his back was turned, caught the last bus home, and collapsed into bed still wearing her uniform. Now she was pouring coffee for the breakfast crowd, pretending yesterday hadn't happened. Pretending she hadn't been claimed as a daughter-in-law by a Mafia matriarch. Pretending she didn't still feel the weight of Daehyun's stare. The diner bell chimed. She didn't look up. "Coffee?" she asked automatically, grabbing a mug. "We need to talk." Her hand froze. That voice. Low, controlled, dangerous. Daehyun stood in the doorway of Giovanni's diner looking absurdly out of place in his tailored black suit. The morning regulars stared. Her manager, Tony, looked ready to call the cops or faint. Maybe both. "I'm working," Zora said flatly. "Take your break." "I just started my shift." "Miss King." He stepped closer, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Please." She hated that word in his mouth. It sounded like a threat wrapped in silk. Tony materialized at her elbow. "Zora, you good?" She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near the phone. Sweet, protective Tony who thought he could take on a man who probably had more kills than birthdays. "I'm fine." She untied her apron. 5 minutes. They stepped into the alley behind the diner. The morning sun hadn't reached back here yet. Everything was shadows and dumpsters and the smell of old grease. Daehyun leaned against the brick wall, studying her. "My mother meant well yesterday. Your mother thinks I'm marrying you. She's recovering from a cardiac event. The medication makes her confused. She seemed pretty clear to me. She's also 73 and thinks she can arrange my life like a business deal." He rubbed his jaw, and for a moment he looked tired. "Human. I apologize for the situation. You're free to go. Forget this happened." Zora should have felt relief. Instead, something cold crawled up her spine. "Why do I feel like there's a but coming?" His eyes met hers. All that brief vulnerability vanished. "You saw my men. You know my face. You know my mother needs protection. That makes you a liability. I'm a waitress. I don't care about your business. My enemies don't know that." He pushed off the wall. "You saved my mother's life. That means you're valuable to me, which means you're a target to them. That's not my problem. It became your problem the moment you touched her." His voice was gentle. Almost apologetic. "I'm requesting you stay at my estate. Temporarily. For your safety." "Requesting." "Yes. What if I refuse?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, would strongly advise against that. Zora's laugh was bitter. "So it's not a request. It's an order. It's protection. It's a cage. It's the only way I can guarantee you'll still be breathing next week." He pulled a card from his pocket. Black, embossed with a phone number. "A car will pick you up tonight. 7 p.m. Bring what you need." He walked away, and Zora stood there holding a business card that felt like a death sentence, realizing her ordinary life had just ended. The Kong estate sat behind iron gates and manicured hedges like a secret the city kept for its most dangerous residents. Zora pressed her forehead against the car window as they drove through, past fountains and stone lions and gardens that probably cost more to maintain than her yearly tuition. The main house rose ahead, all clean lines and dark wood and windows that reflected nothing back. Beautiful. Cold. Exactly like its owner. A woman in a crisp gray suit met her at the entrance. Mrs. Lim, the house manager. She spoke perfect English with barely an accent and showed no reaction to Zora's single duffel bag and worn sneakers. She led her through hallways that echoed, past rooms filled with furniture that looked like it belonged in museums, up a staircase wide enough to drive a car through. "Your quarters," Mrs. Lim said, opening a door. Quarters. Like Zora was military personnel and not a captive. The room was bigger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. A bed that could sleep four. A bathroom with heated floors and a tub deep enough to drown in. Everything cream and white and desperately, suffocatingly quiet. "Dinner is at 7, Mrs. Lim said. "Madame Bok soon is resting but looks forward to seeing you tomorrow." Then she left, and Zora was alone in a palace that felt like a mausoleum. She lasted 2 hours before the silence drove her out. She wandered the halls, trying to map her new prison. The estate was massive. East wing, west wing, gardens, a library that made her heart ache with want. But everywhere she went, she felt watched. Security cameras in corners. Men in dark suits stationed at intervals, pretending not to notice her. She found Dae-hyun in what looked like a study. The door was cracked open. She should have kept walking. Instead, she stopped. He stood behind a desk, surrounded by 4 men. One of them was bleeding from his mouth. Another was holding a tablet, showing images Zora couldn't quite see. Dae-hyun's voice was low, measured, terrifying in its calmness. "I don't accept excuses. I accept results." He switched to Korean, rapid fire, and the bleeding man flinched. "You had one job. You failed. Explain why I shouldn't make an example of you." The man stammered something. Dae-hyun listened, expressionless. Then he nodded once. "Second chance. Don't waste it." The men filed out. One of them saw Zora in the hallway and his eyes widened. She turned to leave but Dae-hyun's voice stopped her. "You can come in, Miss King. You're not a prisoner." She stepped into the doorway. "Could have fooled me. You're free to move about the estate. But not leave it. Not yet." He loosened his tie, and she saw blood on his cuff. "Not his blood. You saw that." "I saw enough." "And what did you see?" She met his eyes. A general. Not a businessman. A general giving orders to soldiers who are terrified of disappointing him. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe. Or warning. "Then you understand what world you're in now." Zora couldn't sleep. 3 nights in the estate and her body still hadn't adjusted to the silence. Back home, she'd fallen asleep to sirens and arguing neighbors and the rattle of pipes. Here, nothing. Just the whisper of expensive air conditioning and the weight of too much space. She pulled on a sweatshirt and wandered downstairs, bare feet silent on marble floors. The house felt different at night. Less like a museum, more like a held breath. She found the courtyard by accident, following a sliver of light through glass doors. It was beautiful in that deliberate way rich people's gardens were beautiful. Stone paths, a koi pond, trees shaped like art. And sitting on a bench near the water, still in his dress shirt and slacks from whatever violence he'd orchestrated that day, was Dae-hyun. He looked tired. Actually tired, not just the performative exhaustion of someone with too many meetings. His shoulders were tight. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, like he was trying to will away a headache that wouldn't quit. Zora almost left. Then his eyes opened. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too quiet. Most people find it peaceful. Most people didn't grow up where I did." She moved closer, cautious. "You look like you could use some peace yourself." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Peace is a luxury I can't afford. Neither can I, but here we are. She sat on the bench, leaving space between them. For a while, neither of them spoke. Just watched the koi move through dark water like living shadows. Why medicine? He asked finally. Because I'm good at it. Because it pays. Because I watched my grandmother die of something treatable and decided no one else should go through that if I could help it. She pulled her knees up. Why crime? Inherited position. My father built the syndicate. I inherited the responsibility of keeping it alive. You could walk away. No. His voice was flat. I couldn't. 200 families depend on our operations for income. 50 businesses pay us for protection they actually need. My mother has enemies who'd kill her the moment I showed weakness. He looked at her. I didn't choose this. But I won't abandon it. Sounds familiar. Does it? I work 16-hour days. I live on ramen and spite. I haven't had a vacation in 4 years. I'm so tired I sometimes forget what month it is. She met his eyes. But I won't quit. Because quitting means my grandmother died for nothing. It means my little brother doesn't get to see someone make it out. So we're both trapped. By different cages. Still cages. The koi pond rippled. Somewhere in the garden, wind chimes sang. Dae-hyun stood. Wait here. He returned 5 minutes later with a book. Leather-bound, pages edged in gold. He handed it to her. Korean history. If you're going to be here, you should understand where my mother's coming from. Her traditions. Her expectations. Zora took the book. It was warm from his hands. This feels like a peace offering. It is. His smile was small. Genuine. I'm told I'm not very good at them. You're doing fine. He left her there with the book and the koi and the first real conversation she'd had in days, and Zora realized that behind the violence and the ice, Kang Dae-hyun was just as tired as she was. Zora was reading in the library when Dae-hyun found her. She'd been at the estate for 2 weeks, slowly learning its rhythms. Madame Bok-soon's daily tea ceremonies. The security shift changes. The hours when Dae-hyun locked himself in his office and emerged looking like he'd sentenced someone to death. Probably because he had. He appeared in the doorway, and something about his energy made her look up. His jaw was clenched. His hands were fists. What happened? She asked. Your landlord received a visit yesterday. 2 men. They asked questions about you. Where you worked. If you had family. When you'd be back. The book slipped from her hands. Mr. Castellano? Is he okay? Shaken. Not hurt. I have people watching him now. Dae-hyun moved closer, and she saw something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. This morning, a package arrived at your old apartment. The new tenant brought it to the building manager. He opened it. What was in it? A photograph. Of you. Leaving this estate. The air left her lungs. There was a note. In Korean. It said, the boss's new toy breaks easily. His voice was ice over rage. They know you're here. They know you matter. Who are they? The Choi family. Rivals. They've been trying to destabilize us for months. I thought we had them contained. He turned away, hands in his hair. I was wrong. Zora stood on shaking legs. I need to leave. If I'm not here, they have no reason to. You think leaving helps? He spun back to face her. You think they'll just forget about you? You saved my mother. You live in my house. You are leveraged now whether you're here or in some apartment across town bleeding out because I wasn't there to stop it. The words hit like a fist. I'm sorry. His voice cracked, just slightly. I told you this would happen. That you'd become a target. But I didn't think it would be this fast. This aggressive. What do we do? I've locked down the estate. Doubled security. No one comes or goes without my explicit approval. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw guilt. This isn't just business anymore. They made it personal. Because of me. Because of what you represent. My mother chose you. That makes you family. And in my world, family is the only thing worth destroying someone over. He exhaled slowly. I need you to stay close. No more wandering the gardens alone. No more library visits without security. I know you hate this. I know you want your freedom. But I need you alive more than I need you comfortable. She wanted to argue. To scream that this wasn't her fight. But looking at the fear barely contained behind his fury, she realized it was too late for that. She was already in the war. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay close. His shoulders dropped. Thank you. The banquet was supposed to be safe. Neutral ground. The Wajin Syndicate hosting allied families for Madame Baksoon's recovery celebration. 200 guests in formal wear, circulating through ballrooms that glittered like something from a fairy tale. Zora wore a dress Madame Baksoon had insisted on, deep blue silk that made her feel like an imposter. She stayed close to Dae-hyun, his hand occasionally brushing her lower back, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Then the lights flickered. Just once. Then the fire alarm screamed to life. Chaos erupted. Guests rushed toward exits. Security barked orders. Dae-hyun's head snapped toward his mother, already moving. Stay with her, he ordered one of his men, then turned to Zora. Don't move from this spot. But the crowd surged and someone shoved her sideways. She stumbled, lost sight of Dae-hyun's dark suit in the mass of bodies. Hands grabbed her arm. Not gently. This way, miss. Emergency exit. The man wore a server's uniform but his grip was all wrong. Too tight. Too purposeful. Zora's instinct screamed. She yanked her arm back. I'm fine here. I insist. He pulled harder, dragging her toward a service hallway. Another man materialized, blocking her escape route. They weren't security. They were Choi. The hallway was dim, service entrance, away from cameras. The first man slammed her against the wall. Pain exploded across her shoulders. Message for your boyfriend, he hissed in broken English. Tell him the Choi family doesn't forget. He raised his fist. Zora didn't freeze. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where freezing meant bleeding. She drove her knee up hard, felt it connect. He doubled over and she grabbed a serving tray from a nearby cart, swung it like a bat. Metal cracked against skull. The second man lunged. She couldn't outfight him but she could be loud. She screamed, bit, clawed, fought like her life depended on it because it did. She tasted blood. Hers or his, she couldn't tell. Then the hallway exploded with movement. Dae-hyun appeared like a nightmare-given form. She'd never seen him move like that. Efficient. Brutal. He broke the second man's arm with a sound like snapping wood, then turned to the first man, who was trying to crawl away. You touched her. Dae-hyun's voice was dead calm. He didn't stop. Neither did the men who poured in behind him. By the time it was over, both attackers were unconscious and bleeding, being dragged away by stone-faced security. Dae-hyun turned to Zora. Blood speckled his white shirt. His hands were shaking. Are you hurt? She was shaking too. I'm okay. You fought back. I wasn't going to just let them. He pulled her against his chest, and the movement was so sudden, so desperate, she forgot to breathe. His arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. You incredible, reckless, brave, he pulled back, cupped her face. Don't ever scare me like that again. She saw it then. What she meant to him. Not obligation. Not his mother's choice. Something real. They didn't speak on the ride back to the estate. Dae-hyun sat beside her in the back of the SUV, his hand wrapped around hers, thumb tracing circles over her knuckles like he needed the reminder that she was still breathing. Security flanked them front and back. The banquet had ended in lockdown. Madame Boksoon was safe. The Choi men were in a basement somewhere receiving the kind of justice that didn't involve courts. But Zora couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear. From fury. By the time they reached the estate, she'd made her decision. She followed Dae-hyun to his study, ignoring Mrs. Lim's concerned offers of tea and medical attention. When the door closed behind them, she finally let herself explode. I can't do this anymore. He turned, face carefully blank. I'll arrange for you to leave. Somewhere safe. A different city. New identity if needed. That's not what I mean. She stepped closer. I can't keep being the thing you protect. The liability you manage. The captive you keep comfortable. Then what do you want? I want to stop being a prisoner. Her voice was steel. I want to know what's happening. Who's threatening me? Why? I want to learn to actually defend myself, not just survive by luck and a serving tray. I want to stop sitting in a beautiful cage pretending I'm not suffocating. Zora. I'm not asking to leave. I'm asking to stay. Really stay. Not as your mother's choice or your burden or the girl you saved from her own kindness. She met his eyes. I'm asking to be your partner. In this. Whatever this is. The silence stretched. He studied her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. You understand what you're asking? His voice was low. Partners means you see everything. The violence. The decisions. The blood. You can't unsee it. I already saw it. Tonight. Last week. Every time you come back with that look in your eyes that says you just did something you can't undo. She closed the distance between them. I'm not some delicate thing that breaks under pressure. I grew up hard. I survived worse than you think. And tonight I proved I can fight. You shouldn't have to fight. But I will. Because running doesn't work anymore. Hiding doesn't work. They know my face. They know I matter to you. She touched his chest, felt his heartbeat racing under her palm. So teach me. Integrate me. Let me be useful instead of vulnerable. He caught her hand, held it there. If I do this, there's no going back. You become part of the family. Not just in name. In reality. I know. My enemies become your enemies. They already are. And if it gets worse? If people die because of choices we make, then we carry it together. Her voice didn't waver. That's what partners do. He exhaled slowly, something breaking and reforming behind his eyes. Then he pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. Okay. Your terms. But you follow protocol. You train. You listen. Deal. And Zora? Yeah? You're terrifying. She smiled against his shoulder. Good. So are you. 6 months changed everything. Zora sat in on strategy meetings now, her nursing background proving useful for understanding injury patterns and vulnerabilities. She trained with Daehyun's security team 3 mornings a week, learning to shoot, to fight, to read a room for threats. She still went to her classes, but now armed guards disguised as students flanked her in lecture halls. Her professors never knew. Her classmates never suspected the tired waitress was sleeping next to the city's most dangerous man. Because that's what she was doing now. Sleeping next to him. Waking up to his arm around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. It had happened gradually, inevitably, like water finding cracks in stone. One night she'd fallen asleep in his study reviewing security footage. He'd carried her to his room instead of hers. She'd stayed. They hadn't told Madame Boksoon. They didn't need to. The old woman smiled every time she saw them together, that knowing, satisfied smile that said she'd orchestrated exactly this outcome. On a cold November morning, Madame Boksoon called Zora to her private sitting room. Sunlight filtered through rice paper screens. Tea steamed between them. I have something for you. She produced a small wooden box, worn smooth with age. Inside, nested in silk, was a naragi. The traditional ornament was exquisite, jade and silver knotwork, clearly an heirloom. This was my grandmother's. Given to her on her wedding day. I want you to have it. Zora's throat tightened. Madam, I can't. You can. You will. The old woman's eyes were bright. Not because I command it. Because you've earned it. Because you chose my son when you could have run. Because you fight beside him. Because when I look at you, I see family. Zora took the naragi with trembling hands. Thank you. For everything. For trusting me. Thank you for saving more than my life that day. Madame Boksoon squeezed her hand. You saved my son from becoming something I feared he'd become. Cold. Alone. Lost. That night, Daehyun found Zora in the courtyard where they'd first really talked. She was holding the naragi, watching koi swim through dark water. He sat beside her. Close. Always close now. She gave you her grandmother's naragi. She did. Do you know what that means? I think so. He took her hand. No fancy speech. No grand gesture. Just Daehyun looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that made sense. Marry me. Not because my mother wants it. Not because it's strategic. Because I choose you. Because I love you. Because 6 months ago you crashed into my life and everything changed. Zora had spent her whole life running from depending on anyone. Building walls. Staying safe by staying alone. But this man, this dangerous, broken, impossibly gentle man, had become her home. Yes. He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promises. Behind them, through the window, Madame Boksoon watched and smiled. The waitress had become a queen. The general had found his equal. And somewhere in the city, their enemies learned what it meant to threaten what the Wajin Syndicate loved. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt this story was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that touch the soul.